The PS2 is a console that never stops giving. Just when you think you've played every game the system has to offer, a hidden gem pops up out of nowhere, and you can't help but give it a try. Most YouTube lists focus on the best-selling, highly acclaimed games that everyone talks about, but today I want to highlight some generally obscure anime games I have found that are surprisingly fun and worth checking out. First up, we've got Fullmetal Alchemist 3 Kamio Tsugu Shoujo, the third installment in a PS2 trilogy that took me by surprise. I played the first game, it was okay, the second one was a solid improvement, but Fullmetal Alchemist 3 was undoubtedly the best of the bunch. Here's the thing though, this game was only released in Japan. Why? Simple. Square Enix owned the rights to the original Fullmetal Alchemist anime and manga, and while they tried to introduce the series to the American market, Fullmetal Alchemist 3 never made the cut. The second game just didn't sell well enough to warrant a Western release for the third. Now let's talk about the game itself. Fullmetal Alchemist 3 has an original story written by none other than Hiromu Arakawa, the creator of Fullmetal Alchemist. If you're a fan of the series, you're in for a treat. What I love about this game is how smooth and easy it is to pick up. You control both Edward and Alphonse as they run through dungeons together. The improvements here are huge. There's a new lock-on system for combat, you can switch between Edward and Alphonse on the fly, and the dungeon design is way better than before. And don't even get me started on the soundtrack. The music in each dungeon is amazing and really sets the tone. Visually, the game is a masterpiece, the art style is stunning, and the developers Rahxephon, who also worked on Naruto Ultimate Chronicles, really outdid themselves with Fullmetal Alchemist 3. Don't get me wrong, Naruto Ultimate Chronicles is good, but this game, it's on another level. Now I know what you're thinking, it's in Japanese, right? But trust me, it's easy to follow along. You don't even need to understand the language to enjoy it. You can find a ROM and play it, or even wait for an English patch down the line. Either way, it's totally worth the effort. By now, most people who know about Yu Hakusho have probably played Dark Tournament, but did you know there's another Yu Hakusho game that never made it outside Japan? Let me introduce you to Yu Hakusho Forever, a game that, in my opinion, is the best Yu Hakusho game ever made. Developed by the same team behind the Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi series, this game has all the right ingredients for an awesome anime fighter. And the best part, it's super easy to pick up and play. Now in terms of the story, the game takes place in the Dark Tournament arc in the anime. A handful of familiar characters like Hiei, Genkai, and Kowenma make an appearance, even villains. Gameplay wise, it's your traditional anime fighting game, but with some seriously cool moves at your disposal. The cel-shaded visuals are absolutely stunning, and the atmosphere during fights is just a chef's kiss. The tournament setting feels lively, the crowd reacts to the action, and the commentator adds a lot of energy to the battles. Even the way the story mode is presented feels dynamic and immersive. Another thing I love about this game is how accessible it is. I'm not really a hardcore fighting game player, and I haven't finished many fighters, but Yu Hakusho Forever, this one I plan to see through to the end. Some people call this a poor man's Evangelion, but I beg to differ. In fact, if I am being honest, I actually prefer Rahxephon over Evangelion. I remember the first time But that's a debate for another day. Let's talk about the Rahxephon PS2 game, an obscure mecha title that plays surprisingly well. If you've ever played Zone of the Enders by Konami, this game is going to feel oddly familiar. You take control of a massive mecha equipped with beam shots and a sharp saber, and the combat is pretty straightforward. You're thrown into these large arena-style battles where your goal is simple: slash, shoot, and survive until you clear the stage. Eventually, you'll take on a boss fight to progress further. But luckily, the game isn't all about combat. There are also exploration sections where you interact with NPCs, develop bonds with characters, and, well, here's where things get tricky. Since the game is entirely in Japanese, I couldn't fully grasp what's happening in these dialogue-heavy segments. If you don't understand Japanese, you can technically play through the game, but following the story will be difficult. That's why it's highly recommended that you watch the anime first before jumping into the game. It'll help you appreciate the world and characters a lot more. Now here's an anime game you probably haven't heard much about, Appleseed EX. It's based on the movie, not the manga, by Masamune Shirow, the same mind behind Ghost in the Shell. And if you're thinking, wait, who even made this game? Well, it comes from the same developers behind The Bouncer and Crimson Tears, and if you've played those, you'll notice the similarities right away. In fact, Appleseed EX straight up reuses assets from Crimson Tears, same art direction, same control scheme, same sound effects, and even similar combos. But here's the thing, I wasn't a fan of either The Bouncer or Crimson Tears. The Bouncer got repetitive fast, and Crimson Tears had some serious issues, mainly its frustrating level design. It was confusing, repetitive, and at times just plain unfair. When I say plain unfair, I mean it was unbalanced. So where does Appleseed EX stand? Well, it tries to fix some of those issues. The level design is far more streamlined and enemy encounters feel a lot more manageable, controls are tight and responsive, and there's a decent amount of depth here, with a variety of combos to master, items to collect, and even a fun RPG system. But of course, there's a catch. Since the game was never localized, it relies heavily on reading comprehension. If you're not fluent in Japanese, you might find yourself constantly translating menus and dialogues just to understand what's going on. That alone might be a deal breaker for some. So, should you play it? If you're a fan of Appleseed and don't mind dealing with the language barrier, then yeah, it's actually a solid step up from Crimson Tears. But if the idea of translating text every 5 minutes sounds like a nightmare to you, you might want to skip this one. I love mecha games, all of them, even the ones I couldn't finish. While looking into some anime-based mecha games, I came across the Gundam series. Yeah, Gundam games are everywhere now, but I wanted something different, something lesser known. And after some digging, I stumbled upon 2 Eureka 7 games on the PS2, both made by Bandai. And the big surprise? They're fantastic. If you're into Zone of the Enders, Armored Core, Sly or Gundam vs Federation, then these games are right up your alley. Combat takes place in tight enclosed arenas where you go head to head in fast-paced, high-energy battles, but luckily, that's not all. Outside of combat, there's a lot to sink your teeth into. You can roam around town, purchase new items, customize your machine, and even engage in story-driven conversations with NPCs. I also like how they've thrown in some hand-to-hand combat segments as well. It helps to keep things fresh and exciting each time. So yeah, Bandai didn't just make one Eureka 7 game on the PS2, they've made 2, and trust me, both are worth every second of your life. There are 2 Inuyasha games on the PS2, one is a 2D fighting game called Feudal Combat and the other is a turn-based JRPG titled The Secret of the Cursed Mask. Naturally, I gave both a shot. I wasn't a fan of Feudal Combat, it felt like just another anime fighter without bringing anything new to the table. But then I decided to give The Secret of the Cursed Mask a chance, and honestly, I was impressed. Instead of following the usual anime game trend of cel-shaded visuals, this one takes a different approach, turning its characters into chibi-style figures. It might not be for everyone, but I thought it gave the game a unique charm. Another pleasant surprise, despite being a JRPG, it isn't a grind fest. You can finish it in around 10 hours, which is pretty short for the genre. What really stood out is the game's original story, featuring new characters and even brand new animated cutscenes, all made specifically for this game with supervision from Inuyasha's creator, Rumiko Takahashi. The only thing I can let you know in advance is that the game takes time to get better. Once you get past the early hours, you're in for a blast. This game is the epitome of weird and fun. It's based on an obscure manga by Yoshio Sawai, and let me tell you, if you thought the anime was bizarre, just wait until you see this game. The story in Hajike Matsuri is completely original, following Boboboubo and his friends on yet another adventure, though calling it an adventure feels questionable. The gameplay is funny as you control Boboboubo, but instead of fighting normally relying on your fists and legs, you defend yourself using the hairs in your nostrils. Combat works by moving both joysticks toward incoming attacks, swatting danger away with nose hair. Survive long enough and you'll face off against a boss in a minigame that requires you to match joystick movements with on-screen prompts. Sounds simple, right? Well, not really. These sections demand lightning-fast reflexes, and if you mess up in the level, you'll have to start from the start. Personally, I just spam save states because I'm not about to lose all of my progress over a split-second reaction test. The game was never released outside Japan, but you can technically finish it under 2 hours. However, without any knowledge of Japanese, you'll be completely lost when it comes to the plot. Also, fair warning, the difficulty spikes hard toward the end, so be prepared for a challenge. And that wraps up this list. Originally I planned to cover 10 games, but I wanted to test the waters first and see how well this kind of list would do. If it performs well, you can bet there'll be a part 2 with 10 more games. That's all for now. Goodbye.